road to the final victory.
What you just witnessed there, my friend, was the most awesome video game opening I had ever seen before. Fatal Fury 3, as of now, is one of the best fighting games I have ever played. No, I never got a chance to play this one until it was released on PC. And I bought it for the same price as all the others, $9.99. And before you ask, I'm going to end the video. This game is absolutely worth playing. It has the amazing story design of the first game, but it improves upon it with all the improvements set in the second game without the cons of the absurd difficulty and confusing lane mechanics, which was really just set in there as an afterthought, it felt. This game actually improves upon those mechanics and makes it a full-fledged system that if you're playing with an Xbox 360 controller, like I am, is actually really fun to play with. This game is freaking amazing. And before you ask, yes, there are still jiggling boobs. So anyway, let's get into the review of Fatal Fury 3, Road to the Final Victory. Wait a second, Road to the Final Victory? Isn't there like 14 of these games now? Fatal Fury 3's development was your typical video game development, except for one major event. An earthquake happened in Japan in January 1995, a few months before this game released. The devastating earthquake caused widespread damage and significantly slowed down the development of Fatal Fury 3. Despite these challenges, the team at SNK pushed through and managed to deliver an incredible game, even if some features had to be cut. Which, I don't know what they were, but clearly, we still have a really good product here. This game's amazing. It delivers on two things that I always look for in a fighting game. An amazing story, and amazing mechanics. Now, the only real problem I see with this game, and why it probably isn't more fondly remembered, is the only console it was released on, from my understanding, is the Sega frickin' Saturn. For those of you who do not know what Sega Saturn is, let me give you a recap. Sega and Nintendo had ongoing rivalry in the 90s, with their Genesis, which I played the heck out of, was going up against the Super Nintendo. Then a new competitor entered the market, Sony with their PlayStation. Then it was Nintendo and Sony going at it. But what the heck happened to Sega? Well, they released the console, the Saturn, and it absolutely sucked. I mean, this was a Sega console that did not have a new mainline Sonic game. Well, if you count Sonic R, then yeah, that's something. And there isn't really that many games that were on the Saturn that were well remembered. I mean, this game clearly would have been amazing on the Saturn play, but I don't really see Fatal Fury 3 competing with the likes of Ocarina of Time or Final Fantasy VII. Unfortunately, that's a sad reality, though nowadays it's available on most consoles, including the Switch, the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the PC. But enough diddle-dallying about that. Let's get into my favorite part of any video game, the story. As always for this story, I'm going with my main character, Terry Bogard. He's the main man, after all. But let's set the stage with some backstory first. As you saw in the opening, Geese Howard is back. But how? Well, it's all thanks to the Phoenix Scrolls, which basically let him defy death. There are 3 more ancient scrolls, and they are said to only appear when the best fighters in the world unite in the same place. The exact requirements are a bit murky, but Geese is after the scrolls, and that's why he's here in Southtown setting up the next King of Fighters tournament. Terry's journey begins at the Pow Pow Calf with Richard Meyer. Remember him from the first game? Richard has an apprentice now, and that's who you fight first, Bob Wilson. Bob's motivation for entering the tournament is to promote his calf, the Pow Pow Calf. Next, Terry runs to his girlfriend, Blue Mary. She thanks him for bringing her to his hometown, where even the cats and dogs wear brass knuckles. Well, how do they walk is my question. But it's a video game. Video game logic rules. They fight, and Terry humorously comments that he likes a girl who can fight. Then, of course, Terry runs to Joe Higashi, who immediately points out that Chang said something was up. Terry beats Joe in a fight and informs him that Chang is a raving loony, but thanks him for stopping by. For the record, Chang is the big rich guy from the last game who entered Fatal Fury 2 tournament for more fame and wealth. He's a good guy in this one, though I don't know what gave him the idea to call him a raving loony. After that, Terry encounters Francisco Bash. Yeah, we're gonna call him Francisco because I can't pronounce his actual name. An airplane mechanic who used to be a top boxer. Francisco's son was kidnapped by Yukazami? Okay, evil Japanese man, who blackmailed him into helping him obtain the scrolls. Terry beats Francisco and comments this guy's in a bash, he's a poof, and wonders what surprises are up ahead. Surprise, surprise! A strange man shows up asking if Terry is the king of fighters, and threatening to throw him out into the bay. This is a one-round story fight. After beating him, the man mentions the scrolls and runs off. Terry comments that Joe just wasn't whistling Dixie, and decides he needs to get a move on. Next, Terry runs to Mai Shiranui, who calls him a beefcake and asks him where the scrolls are, thinking he has them. Why? Like, what led Mai to think that Terry had the scrolls? Whatever, it's a fighting game. They need to fight. And she beats the ever-loving tar out of her. Terry then insults her, and she tells her boyfriend, Andy, who shows up at the next level, understandably mad. After defeating Andy, Terry scolds his brother for telling Mai about the scrolls. For what reason exactly? This story is, it's good, if you can overlook some of the plot holes. Then Terry runs into Hong Fu, a detective on the case of the Yakuzis. They fight, and Terry beats him, basically telling him to get out of the way. Next, Terry encounters, I can't pronounce his name, so we're gonna call him Good Japanese Monk Guy. He's a monk of an ancient order who wants to protect the scrolls and keep them from falling into the wrong hands. He starts interrogating Terry, who has no idea what he's talking about, and then, this being a fighting game, Terry beats the tar out of him. And then the rematch of the century, Geese versus Terry. Geese says it's time to pay back Terry for throwing him out the window in the first game. They fight in Geese's tower, which catches fire halfway through the fight. Despite defeating Geese, he gets away. Terry wants to go after him, but Chang shows up in his private helicopter, which, by the way, showed up in an earlier stage, and says to let him go. They need to get to the scrolls to keep them from falling into the wrong hands. You hop in Chang's chopper and see that Yukazu from earlier has beaten Hong Fu. Terry makes sure Chang gets Hong Fu to a doctor. Then Terry gets ready for the battle for the scrolls. After defeating the evil Japanese man, Terry asks about the scrolls and is told to head to Delta Park, where the main villain herself is revealed. I'll just show you the cutscene. It'll probably make things simpler.
Terry, what? Okay. Delta Park.
Ending can be a bit confusing, but it turns out that depending on your score, you get a different ending. Not to mention, each character has their own unique ending. So, it's like an RPG or pick your own path game, I guess? I don't know. The story is okay, and it was definitely way better than Fatal Fury 2. Though, unlike that game, it didn't have a memorable villain. Krauser was probably a way better villain than this weird Japanese chick, or the big evil Japanese man. But you're probably not coming to the fighting game for the story unless you're absurdly stupid like me. You're here for the gameplay. Let's dive in. As for how you play the game and its new mechanics, well, we'll let the tutorial speak for itself. This new system with 3 combat lanes is called the Oversway system. How does it function? Well, you just saw it. There's not really much else to say. It's basically just like if a fighting game had a built-in game of hopscotch. There are a lot of new characters as well, as we saw in the story section. Personally, I think the best addition is Blue Mary. She's a charge character with a bit of grapple, and even more jiggly boobs. Yeah, I didn't think they got much worse than Mai's, but these are not even realistic at this point. Though, this doesn't really have any say over how I rank her, as she's still one of my top fighting game characters. And then of course there's Bob, who's another character and just not my cup of tea. He's a rushdown character to the core, and playing as him is okay, and he can make the longest combos of any character here, but he just didn't click with me. Maybe it's because I prefer my coffee slow brewed, not rushed. There's Francisco Bash, this weird Kung Fu man. There's a lot of new characters. You can even play as Geese Howard now. And he's overpowered as heck, if you know how to use him. Another thing I can give this game is its character select screen. I mean, look at this. It's like everyone just got together for a big portrait because, well, most of the people are friends and know each other well. Except for Geese. Something tell me he wasn't invited. That's why he's hanging out in the background, probably. Right here, looking like he's plotting his revenge for not getting a party invite.
National Park.
As for extra modes, is the typical 2-player mode where you can go one-on-one. There's also a high score mode and a Carnivan mode. High score mode is where you only have 1 life and you run through the game on normal difficulty with no saves to try to get the high score. Carnivan mode is the same thing but with a 5-minute time limit. It's like speed dating but with more punches and very few awkward conversations. Other than that, there's not much to say about this game. I found most of the special moves pretty easy to pull off. The game isn't too difficult once you master the mechanics, which isn't that hard, especially if you're playing with an Xbox controller like I am. The buttons to move into the other lanes are mapped to the 2 bottom triggers. Oh man, this is just amazing. Typically, you'd have to press 2 buttons at once, then flick the analog stick. And if you're playing with a keyboard, it's even worse, as you have to press 2 keys and the arrow at the same time in order to move into the other lane. So if you're going to play the game, my advice, play it with a controller. Trust me, your fingers will thank you. So where do I score the game? Well, it has an amazing story, even though it gets a little confusing at times. And some things weren't made too clear. It has a solid character roster. The music wasn't bad, but not terribly memorable. I couldn't recognize a single track out of this game if you played it to me later on. The controls can be bad or good depending on what controller you're using. Overall, in my opinion, while not the best, it is still probably one of my favorite fighting games. I'll give Fatal Fury 3 Road to the Final Victory an 8 out of 10. The only place it really loses points are its sometimes confusing story, the fact that it just doesn't have an outstanding soundtrack, which by the way, these are not bad things, it's just not enough to get it a perfect score in my book. That wraps up my review of Fatal Fury 3. Next time, we'll be exploring a murder mystery with a lot of story and twists and turns. It's time to take a break from all these action-packed video games. See you next time. Do me a favor, subscribe, and leave a comment and let me know some of your memories and opinions in Fatal Fury 3 Road to the Final Victory.